Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 3, verse 23. A very famous beginning to the parsha. Moshe says, Vaetchanan Hashem, and I prayed to God, Boesahi lemor, at that moment, saying, Hashem Elokim, ato achilosa la'arosas avdecha, Hashem, you have begun to show your servant esgadcha v'yasiyadcha chazaka, your greatness, your strong hand. Asher Mikael b'shamayim va'aretz, who is the God who in the heaven and earth, Asher Yasech Ma'asecha v'chikvurosecha, that can do like you. Please let me go into the land of Israel. And God, of course, says to Moshe, no. If you look at Rashi, there's two interesting Rashis over here. Vaetchanan, first Rashi on the pasuk. Ein chinun b'chol makom ela lashon matnas chinam. The connotation of the root of chanun is related to the word chinam. Chinam means something for nothing. So the nature of Moshe's supplication is, Hashem, I don't deserve what I'm about to ask of you, but I'm asking you anyway. Even though tzaddikim, the righteous, would be justified in saying, well, I'll tell you why I'm asking you. I've done this good deed. I've done that good deed. You should really help me out, God. I deserve some stuff. Righteous people could say that, but that's not the way. The nature of the righteous is only to ask things of God as if they have no merits going for them, as if, they're just asking him to be compassionate. That's one Rashi, an interesting thing to think about. So Moshe could say, hey, if it wasn't for me, where would your people be today? The least you could do is let me go into the land of Israel. But he doesn't take that tone. His tone is, God, I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I'm asking anyway. Next Rashi, Boesahi, I asked at that time. There's something about at that time, which seems to be an emphasis. There was something about that moment that Moshe intuitively understood was the right moment to be asking. What was it about that moment? Rashi says, La'achar shekavashti eretz Sichon va'og, being that I conquered the lands of Sichon and Og, these mighty kings, we were talking about them a certain amount in last week's parsha. Timisi, I thought to myself, Shemu hutar neder. Maybe things have changed. God had said that I won't be able to go into the land of Israel, but hey, I did something else. Maybe the facts on the ground are different now. It's worth revisiting the issue. Okay, those are both interesting Rashis. Let's go now to the Kli Yakar. Kli Yakar on pasuk Chav Gimel. Vaetchanan el Hashem boesahi lemor. Perish Rashi. Even though the righteous could always say, I'm asking you, God, because of my good deeds. That's not the way the righteous ask for things. They ask for things as a free gift. It's a very difficult thing to understand. Ki kol mitzvah shadam osa ein b'hem dei hashiv ba'al gmulos ka'al yishalem kol tagmulo yalav b'mash kvar asa lo Hashem ki gvar lov chasto mimi voldo. The Kli Yakar asks on this Rashi. Rashi said, a righteous person could always say to God, I really deserve this. It's really coming to me. Says the Kli Yakar, how in the world could a righteous person ever say that to God? Do we want to get into that comparison? Do we want to think about all the things God has done for us compared to all the good things we've done? Does anybody think they're going to win that comparison? So what is he talking about? A righteous person really could fold their arms and say, God, you owe me one. Where do you get that from? Why would that be? An interesting question. V'Rabboseinu Zal, well, I don't want to get too bogged down here, so skip about 10 or 15 lines. V'atshuva l'chol zeh, the answer to this is, Shemash amru sheish latzadikim litlos b'maaseyim atovim. What's meant in the Medrash when it says that the righteous could always hang it on their good deeds, eina perush ba'osan ha'maasim tovim shekvar asu. The meaning is not, well, God, I've done so many good deeds. Don't you think you owe me one? Ella b'maaseyim hatovim sha'asidin lasos. The argument that a tzaddik could make is, God, if you let me go into the land of Israel, think of all the good things I'll do there. Think of all the mitzvahs I'll perform there that I haven't had a chance to do yet. Think of how I'll lead the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Ki mistama kol tzaddik and mevakesh shumana gufanis. I mean, what does a righteous person want anyway? Our image of a righteous person is not that they want to just relax on the beach with a good drink. I mean, our image of a righteous person is they want to be able to do more mitzvahs. Ki im So this is the point that he's making, that the argument of a tzaddik could always be, God, if you let me do this, I'll do more mitzvos for you. So give me that opportunity. The truth is, that's how many explain what we're davening for in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur anyway. We don't think we're so great, but we're saying we have a new attitude. So God, give us more chances. We'll do good things. Now, skipping about 5 lines. Because of his sense of humility, he doesn't want to hang it on all the good deeds he's going to do. Because maybe he won't do as well as he thinks. Maybe he won't do as well as he hopes. Maybe he'll get it and he won't do so many mitzvos. He says, actually, that's the pshat. According to this idea, what it means that I daven to God at that time. Ki asa she'laso basher hu sham al dasa hove shadain ein shum schus biyado. Moshe Rabbeinu davens to Hashem at that time. I'm not promising anything that's going to happen in the future. Who knows? Maybe I won't do such a good job in the future. I'm just asking you for a kindness based on the here and now. So that's an interesting pshat on this medrash. Now let's go on to the next kliyakar. The next kliyakar is Bo'esa Hilemur. I asked God at that moment, saying, and let's jump ahead, skip in the next kliyakar, skip the first 10 lines or so until he gets to Rashi. V'Rashi piresh Bo'esa hi acha shekavashti eretz Sichon va'og dimisi shemu hutar haneder. So Rashi says, once I conquered the land of Israel, I thought to myself, maybe the vow has been undone. V'nira shechashav Moshe kitam haneder hu yan lohem mantam. I mean, why would Moshe think that the rules have changed since he defeated Sichon and Og? Rashi says, since Moshe defeated Sichon and Og, he thought maybe God changed his mind. Why would that be? So explains the kliyakar. God explains to Moshe why he can't go into the land of Israel after the story with the rock. Because you didn't believe in me. If you remember, you could have acted in a different way that would have greater inspired the Jewish people to believe in me, and you missed the opportunity, and therefore you're not going to lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. Lo garamtum li Yisrael lahamin bi al yidei sheyiru nes mefursam zeh. They could have seen this great miracle of the rock providing water, and the fact that you didn't allow that to happen in the way that I prescribed, you came up short. Uv'molchema Sichon Hamid Moshe Hachama. There's a famous Gemara that in the war against Sichon, Moshe caused the sun to be suspended in its place. So that was an open miracle. It must have improved the level of faith that the Jewish people had in God. So Moshe fixed the problem. If the problem with the story with the rock is that Moshe was not enough of an instrument or a conduit for the miracles of God, so now I was involved with a war that there was a very open miracle of God. So I did okay. I fixed the problem. So that's an interesting thing. So that's why Moshe Rabbeinu thinks it's going to be different now. Just both of those kliyakars, I think, are interesting perspectives to reflect on. Let's go on to chapter 4, verse 2. A very famous instruction. Lo sosifu al davar asher anochi mitzaveh eschem. Do not add to the matter which I command you. V'lo sikru mimenu. Do not subtract from it. L'shmor mitzvos Hashem Elokechem asher anochi mitzaveh eschem. To observe the commandments of God. Okay, so these are the famous obligations of Baal Tosef and Baal Tigra. Now, Baal Tosef, don't add to it, is something we can understand relatively easily. So, there are 4 sections in the tefillin. There's 4 sections of psukim in the tefillin. Let's say a person thought about it and said, I think a 5th section would be really nice. So that's adding to the mitzvah. That's not the mitzvah that God gave you. That's Baal Tosef. So you might think, what does God care if I do even more than he asks of me? The answer is no. God doesn't want you to tamper with the mitzvahs. But why does the Torah have to tell me don't do less than what God asks of you? I mean, if God tells me I should wear tefillin that have these 4 sections in it, and I decide I'm only going to wear tefillin that has 3 sections in it, isn't it obvious that God doesn't want me to do less than he instructs? Why do we even need an instruction for that? So there's various approaches, but there's an interesting sforno over here. Sforno on Pasuk Beis. V'lo sigru mimenu lishmor. V'lo yachshav achoshev. A person should not think shakasir tasur sibas ha'isur etzlecha lo yachet legroa. Let's say there's a certain prohibition, and I say to myself, that's the prohibition that God makes, but I don't think it applies to me. There's a reason that that's prohibited. There's certain concerns that God had, but it doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to my circumstances. So I'm all for the commandments of God. I just believe that this commandment of God doesn't apply in this parameter. So that is an example of something that someone might think is all right, but the Torah is prohibiting that outlook. He says, Shlomo HaMelech, Aniyar bevelo asur, Aniyar bevelo ashiv, the famous idea that it's said that the king may not have too many wives. The king may not have too many horses. And Shlomo HaMelech said, I think it'll be okay for me. So the Sforno says that's the kind of thing we're talking about, that a person wants to keep the commandments of God. They just don't think this specific commandment is relevant to them. That's also prohibition, that they're not allowed to take that tack. Interesting thing to think about. Let's go on to verse 9. Rak, but hishamer lecha, be careful. Ushmor nafshecha ma'od, guard your soul very much. Pentishkachas advarim asher ra'u einecha, lest you forget the things which your eyes saw. Ufen yasurum levavcha kol yemei chayecha, and lest it removed from your hearts all the days of your lives. Don't forget what you saw. Teach your children and your grandchildren, verse 10, about Yom Asher Amadta L'fnei Hashem Elokecha b'Chorev. Don't forget the scene at Har Sinai, when you stood before God, Be'emor Hashem Elai, when God said to Moshe, Hakeli Ha'am, gather together for me the people, V'ashmiyem es Dvarai, and I will impart to them my words. Asher Yomodun Li'yiro, see that they should learn to have reverence for me. Kol Hayamim Asherim Chayim Al Ha'adamah, all the days which they live on the land, V'yes B'neihem Yilamedun, and they should teach their children. Okay, don't forget. All right. Let's see Ramban on Pasuk Tes. Raki shomer lecha l'shmor nafshecha mi'od, pen tishkachas advarim asher ro'ei einecha. Be careful, don't forget anything in the Torah. He starts off by citing Rashi. Az kishelo tishkachum, when you don't forget the words of the Torah, v'tasum ala mitasam, and you fulfill the words of the Torah in an appropriate manner, techashvu chacham minavonim, you will be considered to be wise people in the eyes of the nations. If you forget the laws of the Torah and you don't observe them correctly, you'll be considered to be fools. So Rashi understands, and this is, if you look at the earlier psukim, this is sort of in the context of the earlier psukim, Rashi understands that the directive and the warning to not forget anything of the Torah is just a general statement about the Torah. That understand that people of the world will have respect for you if you keep the Torah appropriately, but if you don't study it enough and you don't know it well enough, then they won't have respect for you. We're going to see the Ramban is going to have a very, very different understanding of this pasuk. So we spoke about some famous Rashis at the beginning of the parasha. We spoke about the Kli Yakar's perspectives, both on why I would think that a tzaddik could daven based on their deeds, and why Moshe would think that things would change since he defeated Sichon and Og. And we discussed the Sforno regarding the prohibition of taking away from the commandments of the Torah.